Thanks for the quick introduction there, Pat. Appreciate that. And so I think I'm really figuring out how things go around here. I think it was Charles that said he was gone for 19 years, and it's been about 12 years since I've been gone. But you go and you bring everybody in the morning, go and stuff their stomachs for lunch, sit them back here and turn the lights out and hope that the two new guys can keep everybody awake for the hardest spots right here. And so ultimately that's the challenge that we have right now. But as Pat said and was introduced earlier with Dr. Odie, my name's Jason Woodworth, and I was here a number of years ago, left about 12 years ago. Actually received all three of my degrees right here. Started working with Mark Nelson, Dwayne Davis out at the swine unit as an undergraduate. Stuck around and worked with Jim and the rest of the swine group here, my master's and my PhD. Then went on to work for a company called Lonza, where we did a lot of the carnitine work, did a lot of niacin work that you guys have seen through previous Swine Day right here. And so happy to be back, happy to be part of the K-State swine family again, Bob. And so I really, first off, want to really extend my appreciation, my thanks to the swine team here, making it possible for me to be here today speaking with you. But secondly, I really want to give a big thank you to everybody that decided to stick around for the second half of the day today. And so it doesn't take a PhD to look at the audience here and realize that a lot of people were here for lunch today. And so in any case, what we're going to do is we're going to carry on the discussions right here. The part that Charles had just spoken about was really a good foundation, a good beginning for what I'm going to roll into as well too. And so I'm going to hit on some of the most recent feed processing work that we've done here at Kansas State University. It was a series of studies that we conducted. Two main graduate students, Jeremiah Nemechek and John DeYoung, were the drivers for a lot of this work. Really got to give a big thank you out to the National Pork Board and the Pork Checkoff, as well as the USDA AFRI organization for the funding for a good many of these studies. And so I'm going to go through and share with you 6 different experiments, a couple series of studies there. Actually, studies 7 and 8 and 9 within this series are in some sort of process of implementation or development right now. And so continuing on with this whole structure, looking to continue building on our feed processing technology and information that we have here at K-State. And the studies that I'm going to be sharing with you today are all based on high byproduct diets, and we'll have grow-finish studies as well nursery studies. And so if we start looking at the data, there's going to be some big differences in how a nursery pig responds to some of these changes compared to a grow-finish pig. And so make sure as you're looking through the slides, you kind of keep that impact right here as you're looking at them. So as we get into the data sets right here, what you'll see on each of the slides is the treatments along the bottom axis here with my response criteria along the vertical axis, as well as you'll see a number of different colored bars. In many of the diets, or many of the treatments, it's a meal versus pellet combination. This particular first study was a finishing pig study where we ground corn to 650 microns, formulated the diet with that 650 micron corn, and then also formulated diets with corn ground to 300 microns, or ground the whole diet, formulating a diet with final particle size of 360 microns. And so this would represent that post-mixing particle size reduction that Charles was talking about in his presentation as well. And so what you'll notice right here as we start looking at some of the data, this is average daily gain for the finishing pigs. We did end up starting to see a tendency for an improvement in average daily gain as we increased, or as we pelleted these diets. Saw an interaction where you have this greatest pelleting response really there at the lowest micron diet. But as we carry over and look at what happened in the feed efficiency standpoint of the same group of pigs, you'll see there's a numerical reduction in the feed efficiency of the pigs fed to meal diets, but it wasn't a statistical difference. You see the big response here in improvement in feed efficiency once we pelleted these diets. And this is a common theme that we'll see through a lot of these slides as we can continue on, that the finishing pigs really respond well from a feed efficiency standpoint when we pellet these diets. Very similar treatment structure is what I have on this next slide, just a study conducted with nursery pigs right here. Again, we ground corn to achieve a 737 micron particle size and then blended that in the diets. Used the corn ground to 324 microns, and then post-ground the blend to achieve a diet that had about 541 microns. Just as a point of reference, when we ground this corn to 324 microns, the total diet particle size was roughly 450 microns right here, Bob. This actually ended up with about a 650 micron diet in this slide. So looking at average daily gain again for these nursery pigs, what you see right here is you do start to see a tendency for an interaction between the particle size and the diet form, where definitely a significant increase when diets were fed in the pellet form, and a tendency for a reduction as we started to see a reduction in the particle size of average daily gain. And so if you really think about these diets, this is, when you start looking at this diet, it was about a 420 micron diet, Bob. This is a 541, and so this is the highest particle size, this is the intermediate particle size, and this is the lowest particle size. So if you look at those meal diets, you start to see that trend down in average daily gain as we've reduced the particle size from that 737 microns. And so to put it in perspective, I mean, a lot of people have been here through a number of the years. We've always preached about proper particle size. Normally the goal is somewhere in that 650, 700 micron particle size, what we've always talked about for corn. And so we start talking about 324 micron corn. It's a lot lower than normally what we had been suggesting. Moving on, though, when you start looking at the feed efficiency, first thing that you'll see is absolutely a significant effect with the pelleting. Significant improvement in feed efficiency once we put this in a diet form. However, no change in feed efficiency when we reduce the particle size of that corn lower than that 737 micron that we had as the first diet. And really, if you think about that, we have basically no change in feed efficiency. If you look back at my previous slide, we had a tendency for a reduction in average daily gain as we started feeding those pigs, which means that as we reduced particle size of this corn, the pigs also had a reduction in average daily feed intake. That got us to thinking, you know, what's happening right there? Are these pigs having a preference for feeds with low particle size versus high particle size? We conducted a preference study right here, and Joel already shared one study this morning, kind of set it up. But the way we do these studies, we have a pen of pigs, and we put 2 feeders in each of these pens. In this particular study, we had a feeder with feed made based on corn ground to 600 microns and a feeder with corn ground to 300 microns. It's pretty clear here that the pigs that had 300 micron corn-based feed did not like to eat it. So 70% to 80% of the total feed consumption was of the diet that had the ground corn to 600 microns. And so definitely something to keep in mind as we're start continuing on the discussions with the mindset that every improvement in every reduction in particle size will lead to improvements. And this might suggest that once we get too low, we're going to have some issues right there. Next set of studies that I'm going to talk about today were both again in nursery and grow finished trials. We did a study with 3 different kinds of pellet quality with a meal, and then the pellets with a very high quality pellet screened, as well as a poor quality pellet with 30% fines. And then with feeder adjustments with 5 to 7 pens per treatment in this study. So here's a pictorial representation of really what happened once we went and approached these treatments out in the field. You see the narrow adjusted feeders at the very top. See the wide adjustment of the feeders at the very bottom right here with the meal diets, and then the poor quality pellets, and then the very good quality pellets on the outside. And so one thing what you'll see right here already is about a 52% pan reduction, or pan coverage, I'm sorry, with the meal diets and when it's a narrow adjustment compared to the really high adjustment with the wide adjustment right here. One thing that you'll notice, and especially I'd like to point your attention right this one with the poor quality pellets, it's kind of hard to see, but you'll notice that there's a lot of pellets right here in the middle windows, but at the very ends you'll see a lot of the fines and a lot of the sorting of the pigs right here. And so what's happened is those pigs have really sorted those fines out to the corners. It's allowed really the pellets to resolve in the middle. Effectively, what's that done if the pigs don't want to eat it? It's reduced the amount of feeding space that you have in this pen. So the focus again here today is really on good quality pellets when you're going through and talking about this. Okay, start looking at the average daily gain of these pigs fed these different treatments right here. I mean, the first thing that you're going to see is definitely an improvement in gain when these diets were fed in pellet form with that best gain observed with the high quality pellets. You'll also notice that in this particular study, we saw an increase in gain with the wider feed adjustment. Again, to put this in perspective, and everybody's been here the last couple years, 5 years, 10 years, I mean, back when I was in graduate school right here, we've always preached to tighten up those feeders and improve feed efficiency, really make that work. And so look at this average daily gain and response right here, and compare that then to the feed efficiency of this same set of pigs. When you see no difference in feed efficiency on each of these with a wider feed adjustment, what that means is that with that increased gain was a reflection of an increased feed intake of these pigs as well. So effectively what that means, and we had those feeders cranked too tight, we were limiting the feed intake of these pigs. And so what you'll see then in some of our recommendations going forward right here is a bit of a widening of our feeder adjustment recommendations for the nursery pigs. We want to make sure that we have feed available in front of them at all time so that we don't effectively limit them by only looking at feed efficiency as the main response. Also, what you'll notice is definitely the significant improvements with the pellets. High quality pellets being a lot better than the pellets with a 30% fine. So again, one thing you need to be thinking about if you're pelleting your diets, don't measure your mill throughput just on the amount of tons of pellets you get out. Measure the tons of good quality pellets that you get out. Don't be cranking those feeders through in the feed mills to just generate output. Very similar treatment structure then in the finishing pigs, where we had the same 3 dietary treatments and then the 2 feeder adjustments. Again, another pictorial. This is with the meal diets, with the narrow adjusted feeders and the wide adjusted feeders. And then what I have in the 2 panels is the phase 1 representation and the phase 3 right here. And so what I want to bring your attention to, especially in these narrow adjusted ones, look at the phase 1 feeders with about 30% pan coverage, and then once you get to phase 3, about 89 to 90% pan coverage. What you're seeing right here is these pigs getting older and bigger and working these feeders harder and bringing out more feed, even though both of these feeders are adjusted to the same level. The key here is to remember when you're going in and rocking these barns, especially starting about the middle of the finishing phase, to make sure that you're paying a lot of attention to the way these feeders are adjusted. You'll have to start cranking them down a little bit as those pigs get older, because they'll start working the feeders harder. They'll start generating more feed. Very similar response when you look at the pictures from the very high quality pellets, especially in the narrow coverage, about 44%. Once those pigs get bigger into phase 3, you have about a 92% coverage with the same opening of the feeder. And so again, make sure you're looking at that feeder adjustments as you get into the latter half of that finishing phase and go through. So a little bit different here than what we saw in the nursery pig study, where the wider feeder adjustment in this study did not show a significant increase in average daily gain. You see a certain tendency in the meal diets. Maybe it's reflection back of only about 30% pan coverage in those early phases. But ultimately, you don't see a big difference in increasing feed opening. However, you do see a significant increase in pellets from an average daily gain, or at least a tendency for a gain. Again, illustrating the importance of pellets, and especially a high quality pellet. Coming back and looking at the feed efficiency, though, of these pigs, this is where you start to see the pickup of the negative ramification of having the feeders open too wide. Worsening feed efficiency on all 3 of these diets, indicating those pigs had enough feed. They were starting to waste and starting to sort with this with too wide of a feeder opening. Again, clearly the benefits of the pellets and leading to a better feed efficiency, with the pellets, with the poor quality pellets with 50% fines having an intermediate response. Just going to talk real briefly on a study right here that I know that the guys hit on last year, where we looked at meal versus pellets across 3 different diet regimens. And I want to bring the study up just for one particular point, and that's really to look at the iodine value right here. So we saw the same feed efficiency response that we've seen with all the other pelleting diets thus far. But what you can notice, though, that once you start pelleting these diets, which are the purple bars compared to the green, we see a higher iodine value reported. So, I mean, all of these guys, or everybody in the audience, I assume, is probably pretty familiar with iodine value right now. Maybe 10 years ago it would have been something new for a lot of us. But what this is an indication of the unsaturated fatty acid index here of these animals. For some reason, when we pellet these diets, we have an increase in iodine value, which is a worsening of iodine value. And it's something that when we saw this first study, we kind of scratched our heads a little bit about, but as we start talking to other people in the field and conducting some other studies, this is a real response. And so it's something that if you're going to marketing your pigs to Triumph or any of these other packing plants that really have a big focus on iodine value, you need to keep in mind that you'll have a certain amount of a pelleting effect to increasing the iodine value of your carcasses. Last study I'm going to share right here for you again is another finishing pig study, where we fed again the meal versus pelleted diets with 3 different corn particle sizes ranging from 650 microns to 350, and then a 50-50 blend of these represented with about 960 pigs in this study. Looking at average daily gain again from a finishing phase, you see that there was basically no change in diet diet form. I'm sorry. Let me step back. There was a change in diet form with average daily gain, where you saw that the pelleted diets had a significant increase in average daily gain, as well as starting to see a similar reduction in average daily gain as we go from 650 micron corn down to the 350 micron corn. As we lowered the particle size, we saw a reduction in average daily gain. From a feed efficiency standpoint, we saw an interaction right here where in the meal diets, the blue diets, we saw a reduction and improvement in feed efficiency. However, with the pelleted diets, we saw a worsening, an increase in the feed efficiency as the particle size reduced. ultimately what that means then is we start looking at the effects of particle size on feed efficiency. I don't know if Kelly Wonder is still in the audience right here. There he is back there, but it's, I was joking with him a little bit this morning. Here's Kelly's data from 1995, and we're still showing this up here. It's still viable information for the audience. But first thing what you'll see is we've got a series of studies right here from 1994 and 1995 compared to some of the more recent studies. And in all these studies, you see a similar trend or an improvement from approximately 800 down to about 400 microns on feed efficiency. About 1.2% improvement per 100 microns reduction in the earlier studies. We see about a 1% improvement per 100 microns here. And so definitely still the trend is there to reduce in feed efficiency, or to improve in feed efficiency when we reduce from about 700 to 800 microns down to about 400 in finishing pigs. The big thing here that you'll also notice, Wayne, is that there's a big difference in improvement in feed efficiency in general between the last few years from 18 years ago. If I can, maybe. Yeah. Do you have a question, Wayne?
Well, it does look like 350 microns on the narrow feed efficiency.
In the meal.
So I guess that's like confused the meal versus even on the pellet. On the meal it did. Yeah. There was an interaction.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, the interaction right here, the pelleted diets, the red diets, is the one that's kind of a little bit out of the norm that we would expect right here, where we saw this increase in or worsening of feed efficiency. I mean, we still got the meal diet. We still got that feed efficiency response right here with the meal diets. And actually, that's what you see right here in this blue line, is that diets right there. And that trend is still there, even in these diets. And again, a significant improvement in baseline feed efficiency. Bob, I'd like to attribute this to the job that you've done here from a nutritional standpoint, but I'm sure there's a certain genetic component there as well too. But overall, you still get that benefit in feed efficiency by grinding it. So let's talk about some conclusions right here from a particle size standpoint. I mean, definitely reducing particle size improves feed efficiency. It's important, though, to differentiate that from the grow-finished pigs to the nursery pigs. And in grow-finished pigs, it appears that there is still a certain reduction or improvement in feed efficiency when we grind down to about 300 microns in the meal diets, Wayne. So that's the big thing. All right, thanks. However, when you start putting that in pelleted diets, it doesn't appear that there's a big difference in feed efficiency once we get below 600 microns. The focus here is high-quality pellets. I mean, we really can't stress that enough that really the attention needs to be on producing a high-quality pellet for your pigs. From a nursery pig standpoint, we haven't seen any benefit in feed efficiency, it appears, grinding below 600 microns. A lot of that, going back to the preference study, John, it appears these pigs just don't want to eat those diets, especially in a meal form. And so when you start looking at feed intake and gain, we see reductions when corn is ground down to this 300 microns. And so maybe it's something we need to consider about. I know Charles had mentioned that the North Carolina boys are wanting to go to 300 microns. Maybe they need to really consider whether that's the right move or not at this stage when you start also factor in all the costs associated to go to that level. Looking at some summaries from a pelleting standpoint, here's 16 different studies where we looked at average daily gain in feed efficiency in the last 8 years. Ultimately, the total, the easy sum of all of these ends up with a 4.4% improvement in average daily gain, about a 5% improvement in feed efficiency when finishing pigs are fed a pelleted diet. So it's something that's fairly consistent. It's carried on throughout the studies we've conducted here at Kansas State. So, for pelleting, again, conclusions, definitely improvements in average daily gain and feed efficiency as we've shown here today. Responses, though, are a little bit dependent on particle size, with a greater feed efficiency reported with the higher particle sizes. So maybe there's a certain amount of a grinding effect, particle size reduction during that whole pelleting process. We also do see that the responses are dependent on the diet formulation, where diets with higher byproduct diets tend to have a better response to pelleting. Responses dependent on pellet quality. Again, we need to make sure that when we're feeding the pellets, we have a feeding the high-quality pellet. One of the things we do need to take in consideration is the change in iodine value. The study that we saw was the first one right here. There's a number of other studies that are out there in the literature and in the field right now to show that when you pellet diets, you do have this increase in the iodine value that we need to consider. And finally, we start thinking about the economic analysis of considering pellets. We need to consider the impact from certain genetic lines that do have an increased mortality when they're fed a pelleted diet. And so that definitely has to be factored into the overall consideration process. First two studies that I showed looked at some complete diet grinding. maybe this doesn't agree completely with what Charles had indicated right there as well too. And in our studies, at least from feeding complete diet ground to roughly 350 to 400 microns, we didn't seem to have an appearance and improved performance with these high fiber diets. It also matches up with some of the previous research that we've done where we've ground distillers or wheat midds, soybean hulls, soybean meal to lower particle size than that typically received in the diets. And so ultimately, the biggest impact from grinding appears to be from your whole cereal grain, your corn, your wheat, your milo, whatever it is coming through there. Part of the issue with grinding the whole diets is it appears that there's a reduction in intake of these pigs. For some reason, the pigs don't like to eat a fully ground diet again. And the big key there, and as Charles indicated, he would do this if he was pellet on these diets to be able to get an increase in pellet quality. You need to make sure that you're getting a big enough increase in pellet quality to offset that additional cost of really grinding this whole diets together. I'm going to leave you with one last slide, and I know you guys had the opportunity to be able to see some of this outside, but out in the lobby right there, back by the posters, there was a booth from the Iowa State group from the feed efficiency standpoint, and they all have all these fact sheets, technical sheets to be able to pick up available for you. And so I know they're all sitting out there on the table. Feel free. I mean, there's technical sheets on particle size and pelleting, which is what I just talked about, but a lot of other good information out there too. And so make sure you have that available and carried with you on your way out. So with that, I'll hand it over to Steve, and he'll talk a little bit about net energy studies that we've conducted here at K-State.
All right. We're getting to the home stretch, getting to the ice cream. Is that right, Jim?
Oh yeah, we're going to heat it up to 140 and have ice cream.
Ooh, yeah. I don't know if you'll call that ice cream in hell. Or... Anyway, thanks a lot. Really appreciate you guys. It's always a joy to be at Swine Day. It's a joy to work with all the grad students. You know, we continue to have such great students that come through. They're always getting ideas, winning awards, doing all this stuff. It's really great. Keeps us going. I know, like Marcio, I can't answer all his questions. I had to shift him to the stats department now. They got too complicated, you know. So that's good. Great bunch of faculty we got to work with. You know, like, who would ever know you got world-class experts in pig poop that, you know, you can walk down the hall and ask questions to about, you know, and all the world-class experts. We should give a shout out to Joel. He was selected as one of the 40 most influential under 40 people in agriculture in North America. So great honor, along with all the other awards within our group. You know, just really great to work with. And then, you know, the thing that I really love doing is getting out on farms and working with you guys. I get to work with, you know, get to go all over the world, get on some of the most productive farms anywhere in the world. You know, we call them, they're equivalent to Olympic class athletes that for the producers we get to work with, you know. I mean, think about what Charles said when he talked about, did you hear his excitement when he said it's a good day to get to a feed mill? You know, how many people in the world that you'd say that to and they get excited about that? Well, when you say you're in the pig industry and you're excited about it, isn't it great? So really appreciate that and really appreciate you guys being here. So, talking about net energy. This is kind of one of those topics that maybe isn't the most exciting topic on earth. It's kind of not real exciting, but it's really important. Remember, energy cost in the diet drives total, you know, basically it's about 80–85% of the total cost of feed is driven by energy. And so just net energy, you know, that's a term, it's kind of becoming in, and it's become a lot more important. Oops, which one's the pointer? Now I really screwed it up. You know I'm this technological whiz here with this stuff. All right, just that big button in the center. That's pretty simple, isn't it? All right. You know, like I said, the first 10 years of my nutrition career, I got to formulate a corn-soy diet, and I enjoyed every minute of it, to tell you the truth, because then I could work on other stuff like pig production, and stuff. But then, the next 10 years I've had to learn how to be a nutritionist actually, and in the last few years we've been using a lot lower energy diets and, a lot different. And so what's important there is having an energy system that's predictive of growth performance, right? Wayne, you're always telling us, it's easy to be a nutritionist. It's just putting in just that right amount that's the difficult part to be. Yep, putting in the right amount. I don't know how many times I've heard you say that. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get equations that are predictive. And in the past, we've used metabolizable energy or digestible energy. You've heard those terms a lot. And net energy is really a more accurate system where it takes into account the heat that's lost. And it's really a more accurate system. In the past, we haven't used it extensively. One, because we only used corn soy diets. And two, net energy values were very difficult to obtain. So for a wide variety of ingredients, we didn't have very accurate values. That's changed over the last 10 to 15 years. And with the new NRC, we think there's values in there that they're widespread across a lot of ingredients, and we think they're a lot better representation of the accuracy of ingredients. Okay, and so where we started from is Srimas Nidhi-Kanchana, who just finished her PhD here. She's a real, for some reason in the I wing over there, we kind of attract the math geeks in our wing, and I don't know why that is, but she came in and she got real excited, and she got to working on doing a meta-analysis, because the problem has been when you get a prediction for energy, it hasn't been very accurate. It's relatively accurate for feed efficiency, but it's not been real accurate for growth rate, and we've not been very confident in that. So she did a meta-analysis, got every study, went over the last 20 years, went through the literature. Then she took the kind of a unique thing here. She took the new ingredient library, reformulated all these diets so that we got them all to a common language. That's basically what she was doing, is reformulating that to get out some of the variability across the trials. And you can see, representing a wide range of net energies. Just for reference, a corn soy diet is about 2,400 kcals per kilogram. So it's right in the middle there, all the way from some high-fat diets down to some lower energy, a wide range of ingredients, a wide range of different chemical compositions. And then she did some, put a statistical model together. And just to tell you a little story about we learned a lot about different statistical modeling, and she's got a good friend in the stats department who's a grad student in stats, and we leaned pretty heavily on her. And Srimas came back one day and said, yeah, I was telling my stat friend that we were doing these kind of modeling, and her stat friend looked at her and said, you mean people actually use this stuff in real life to make decisions? That was like the first thing that it dawned on him, that like anybody else outside the stat department would actually use it. So that was good. She really extended our group there and brought a lot of new knowledge on how to use SAS. The big thing, one of the big things she found is she went through and she did pages and pages of models, looking at the best predicted models and figuring out how to do this. And one thing we learned through the literature is there was this interaction with lysine. We look at, as net energy increased in the diet, if you didn't have enough lysine in the diet, you didn't get an improved growth rate. And in the nutrition world, we all know this intuitively. We know the concept, but quantitatively, we didn't realize how many trials there are out in the literature that are probably under the lysine requirement. And I know James Usry's told us this for years, and we've known it, but we didn't realize how widely pervasive in the literature it really is. And you can see this is clearly this interaction that if you don't have enough fuel and energy and amino acid building blocks, you aren't going to get the growth rate. Same thing with feed efficiency. This one, you still do get a boost in feed efficiency even if you are deficient here, but you can see how much better it is when you do have lysine. And so what she did is she went through and eliminated all the observations that were below what we would predict for the requirement using some of our modern methods of prediction. And she just eliminated all those observations, and it was like 40% of the database she had to eliminate. But then she came out with a predictive model then that is based on body weight and net energy value in the diet, and it's kind of the growth rate is curvilinear depending on body weight, and this we've done lots of growth rate modeling and collecting growth curves, and so this comes right out. The literature says this over these 41 studies, and then you can see about 11 grams of NE per 100 kcals, or about 0.05 in average daily gain for every 100 kcals in energy. That you get this nice linear response then when you got enough amino acids driving in the diet. And for those of you that are real math geeks, this is in the new Swine Day, this equation, so you don't have to copy it down here. Feed efficiency, this one was a linear response. We didn't have the curvilinear. Feed efficiency, you can see as the net energy went up, feed efficiency improves. I think you add fat to the diet, you increase the energy density, feed efficiency gets better. The one thing we learned from this was dietary fat still came into the equation, telling us that maybe our net energy values aren't quite exactly right. They aren't quite exactly right yet for some ingredients, especially high-fat ingredients. So it's telling us that we probably need some work to do on the net energy values for our predictions of our high-energy ingredients. So clearly, net energy, we can build regression models and be predictive based on net energy, predict growth rate, predict feed efficiency, and across a wide variety of trials, different dietary ingredients. Now, the base level of performance is going to depend on a lot of other factors like environment, health, and disease. But looking across different energy values, this is very valuable for building economic models. It's a big deal. And another unique thing she just didn't go out into the literature and do all this summary, is we came in and then we tested it with actual growth data within our farm. And what we did here is set this up with 5 different dietary treatments where we used a wide variety of different ingredients. You can see all the way from high energy choice white grease down to low energy, high fiber here diets with soy hulls, mids, and DDGs to try to get a representative range of net energy values. And over 2 experiments here, how we have this set up is we use the corn soy diet as the base, and then we adjusted the equations so that the corn soy predicted right on, and then used it relative to that prediction. And you can see based across these diet types, and these bars are the 95% confidence interval, so anybody that's been in my class, they know how to make those now, and we can put these together. Anyway, you can see out of the 5 different diets, the ones from the mids and hulls all the way up to the corn soy choice white, they're almost right on in both studies. The one area where we do have our predictive modeling probably needs some work yet is when we get to really high fiber ingredients in that diet. We're probably getting over the gut capacity of the pig or something like that. So you really got to be careful. If you're really going low energy, our predictive modeling probably isn't quite as accurate as we'd like it to be, but boy, over a wide range of net energy values, these values are coming spot on, so we think this equation is fairly robust. And you can see gain to feed, which is just feed efficiency flipped. And so you can see again, these 4 diets right on, spot on, a little bit off on the diet with the mids, hulls, and DDGs. And then also, this is a number we're starting to talk about more so than just feed efficiency, is we're calculating caloric efficiencies. And you can see across this wide variety of different dietary energies, look at that. On a live weight basis, you can see no difference in caloric efficiency there. So that's great. That's telling us the net energy is across these different ingredients, it's relatively accurate. And when we get it to a carcass weight basis, earlier in the presentation, Joel and Jason talked a little bit about some of the withdrawal studies that we've done and some of the high fiber ingredients and their impact on yield. You can see when we had this high fiber diet, our caloric efficiency wasn't quite as good as it should be, and so you can tell there's some different characteristic about this combination of diets. But then when we look at across our other energy levels, our caloric efficiency on a carcass weight basis is exactly identical. So that tells us our energy system is doing a really good job of predicting this caloric efficiency, and tells us that from an economic perspective we can do a good job of predicting the outcome on the feed efficiency basis. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike and give us bat and cleanup here.
All right, I'm just going to finish things off today with just a few slides to summarize things and show you the way out to the feed mill for any of you that don't know how to find it. First off, it is really an exciting time to be in the swine industry. Like Steve Henry was talking about, and with Dr. Hesse this morning, some of the problems in terms of the PED. Realistically, obviously, we want to keep that problem out of our farms, but that problem plus combined with some of the other things that have gone on in the last couple of years have led us to where we are today, where there's a lot of exciting times. We're in one of the highest profitability times staring at us as what we've probably ever had in the swine industry. And that's a very exciting time for any of us to be living through after we've lived through what we had just the last few years. And so those of you that are still surviving around here, this is very exciting. And when you look at where Dr. Henry talked about where SEW pig prices are at. These are from Friday, from the summary of last week. Average price paid last week in the U.S. for SEW pigs was $73.69 a pig. Okay? Unbelievable numbers. Yep. And it's going to be higher. That's and the low of the week was $65. The high and the reported numbers was $82. That was up from the previous week by $6 to $7 a pig, and it certainly looks like that's moving up higher. One of the things that I think that you want to think about there, those that are producers, is that if you do have the situation, and I think Dr. Henry brought this to my attention, and hey, I hadn't thought about it that way, but if you had a situation where you have some disease issues that you need to clean out of facilities and stuff, or you need, and watch for this next spring in particular, that if you are going to be tight on space going into the summer and these prices are still up that high, if you can sell out a week's worth or 2 weeks worth of production at a pretty nice price in order to maintain your market weight and the rest of your pigs, we've got some very unique opportunities that you want to take advantage of. Obviously, the lean hog prices, they've come off a little bit of where some of those highs are at. They bounced back a little bit from I put these in a couple days ago. But again, looking at some pretty good opportunities next summer, which is why these prices have driven up to where they're at. And if you look at where those prices are coming from, why people think they can pay that much for a weaned pig, is this is where the weaned pig break even. Weaned pig break even, if you buy a pig today to cover all of your costs, is about $84 is what the break even price is using futures. And using the prices that are here as 98 in hog futures, 403 in soybean meal, and 435 on corn. And with the look at nursery and finishing space, and those are pretty reasonable prices from what we see in terms of Iowa, southern Minnesota, a lot of our Kansas space costs. One of the other things that when we looked at these the other day, Steve Dreet said bring up, this is also the reason why we've seen some nursery production going back into place. It looked like we were going all wean to finish. People are obviously starting to realize that nurseries are still cheaper to build than finishers. And so we've seen some construction of nursery facilities happening again recently. But if you look at that, $84 on break even on a weaned pig, this $106, if you've already got a building out there that you're paying rent on, you can pay up to $106 and make it work basically instead of leaving that place sit empty. That's where that people think they can sometimes even pay higher than the 84 and why that price is getting bid there. Okay? I've just got a couple of these historical slides. I think you've seen any of that's been a profitability conference a few years ago. We had this shown at this point back here when things were really starting to run. This is the average corn price received by U.S. farmers in the United States. And for some of you in the audience that haven't seen this series, I think this is really unique, nice to look back at history and see what some of these major disruptions or changes that took place. You go back here and you look at the price in the early 1900s and this big jump up in corn price. Obviously, what happened here in 1940? World War II, right? Totally changed our commodity structure. All commodities went up and value never came back down. But you can see that immediately after that, you had this huge rise during the war years, then came back down. You can see with the next jump, you had a bigger jump, and you see some more volatility. But I tried to go back and put these on the same frame to put them on percentage of that average price. This looks like there's not that much volatility. This is about 3 times the amount of volatility as what we had in the 70s when you put them on the same scale. What happened in the early 70s? Oil, right? Oil prices and all commodities. It's interesting. Most of our students, when I asked about this the other day, and we had some of our best undergraduate students in one of the honor classes, I got to talk about the swine industry, and I showed them some of these numbers. They all knew what happened here. Not a one of them knew what happened here. They're all too young for that, but it's interesting. And then of course, we've got the new jump up. And of course, the question is where's that price going to be out long term? I always kind of look at, and I'm not a very good economic predictor, but it looks like it goes up about 2x every time to a new plateau. It'll be interesting to see where that next plateau is going to be. And it'll also be interesting to see if it's going to be another 30-year swing before we have another major disruption. We can only hope so. Yep. And of course, you look at historical hog prices, they follow behind. The problem is they lag behind. And so you go through that very painful period of the delay before they move to that new point also. And when you look at here, I think our hog prices, in all reality, if you're based on past history, we're still on that upward climb of where that's really going to end up at. So it's an interesting look at history on that. Okay, for a research summary, just to walk through what we heard today. We started off with Jim talking about breeding sows and lactation. It is possible. When Hyatt Frobos came to us with the idea and wanted to do this, we thought he was nuts. And thought that, well, nobody's going to do that. It doesn't make any sense, but we'll try it, and it really does work. Certainly, more work is needed on it, to determine the protocol and whether it's feasible in commercial production. And with Hyatt pushing us, we're going to do more trials there, and I do think that we're going to figure out ways to make that happen. That's probably not going to be everybody doing it in the industry in any couple of years, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if we see this happening in the next 10, 15 years in some major production systems. Because it does give you more pigs per sow per year if you go through the math. And that's why I think economically it'll drive us there eventually. DDGS energy levels are highly variable, and I know we've talked about oil quite a bit, and we know that oil doesn't predict everything. Rob's told us this numerous times, and Rob's very concerned about us spending too much emphasis on oil, but we do think that's very important for the net energy side. You can't ignore the oil. It doesn't predict DE, as Bob showed, as well as it produces our net energy in our experiments. And withdrawal for at least 20 days before market, it certainly looks like the economics drive us there. DDGS at the current moment has priced itself out of many diets. If you don't have L-tryptophan, it definitely has in a lot of certainly in our Kansas producers. The use of L-tryptophan drives the economics, and that's what Charles Stark talked about in terms of how you can get that done in the mills, and can you use it appropriately in your mill. And the economic model, so Bob showed you some of those. That's up on our website again for you to access that. Joel talked about superdosing of phytase, that it certainly does appear to provide some value in the nursery and the early grower. One of the areas he didn't highlight on quite as much that I think we do need to pay attention to, usually economics will keep us away from some of these really bonehead running way too high, but it does look like if we put in boatloads of this stuff, there's some negative to putting too much in. Don't understand that yet in terms of what it's releasing or what it's causing there, but when every trial we've done, if we go to the very, very high levels of phytase, we always start to hurt performance. And that's a very high level in some of these studies, more than what we would do economically, but you do have to think about that. Pelleting appears to increase the zinc requirement of these pigs. I think our data just adds on to what a lot of other people have shown there. Tribasic copper chloride certainly does show to provide us some value in finishing pig diets. These low tryptophan lysine levels, we are continuing to do a lot of work there because it does keep telling us that we increase our risk substantially when we drop these borderline tryptophan lysine levels in these pigs. That's what also makes us a little nervous about putting tryptophan into some of our mills that don't handle adding small inclusion rates very well. Yeah. Particle size, we debate this all the time. What's the right particle size? And Jason did a nice job walking through all of the different trials that we've done. Certainly it looks like for finishing pigs in particular, less than 500 microns for feed efficiency continues to drive that down, but it does lower average daily gain. So again, comes back to how much value you're getting from the feed efficiency as with corn price at a given time in the moment versus what you're giving up on lost average daily gain. You do have to put those two together. We're even seeing some of that lost average daily gain in our pelleting studies, which makes me a little nervous there. So we're recommending that 500 to 600 microns, especially in our meal diets, until further notice. Put that disclaimer on there. As we go to these 4 high roller mills and we can get a more uniform particle size and not have those fines that we think are causing the problems with pelletability and intake, that's where we're going to test that, and we may be able to drive that down a little bit. And Steve finished up, told us that each 100 kcals per kilogram of NE increases average daily gain by about 11 grams per day, or every 100 kcals per pound in a pound system is about 0.056 pounds per day. And those aren't very far off from what our data used to tell us about added fat and what added fat did. When you go back and go through the math, these are pretty darn close to what adding fat to a corn soy diet tells us improves average daily gain. So it's nice that when Streamus gets done with all this statistical analysis and actually putting the science to it, that it comes out with a number that makes some sense to us. Okay. I just wanted to pull up our website to show you, again, at ksuswine.org. A couple of things we've added up there recently that some of our research friends in the audience may be interested in is we've got hot links now. Every one of our journal publications are hot linked here, every one of our journal abstracts. And so if you want to find anything, and any that try to find old abstracts and dig up stuff, especially all of our former students that have abstracts, they're all up here now, and so you can actually find the stuff. And so our Swine Day presentations will be posted here as soon as Tim gets them all broke down and posted up here. You can find ones from previous years that are all listed at this site, as well as our Swine Day publications. And of course, the spreadsheets that we're talking about are all under these nutrition resources. And with that, it's very easy to find the feed mill. This looks like a complicated map, but what this really is this street just out to the west here. You get on that street, that's Denison, and you take it north. Denison will take you north until you get to Kimball, and you'll see the feed mill from Kimball. You get on Kimball at that light for just until you get to the Grain Science Complex, pull in, and the feed mill is right there. Okay? And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Pat,